Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating crossover scenarios you could imagine. What if Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the wizard who defeated Voldemort, somehow crossed paths with Bella Swan and Edward Cullen from the Twilight Saga? What if these three became friends? Now I know what you're thinking. These are two completely different universes with different rules, different types of magic, and very different vibes. But that's exactly what makes this so interesting. Stick around because we're about to explore how this unlikely friendship could form, what conflicts would arise, and whether these three could actually make it work. Let's set the stage here. Imagine it's after the events of Deathly Hallows. Harry Potter has defeated Voldemort, the wizarding world is rebuilding, and Harry has taken a position as an Auror. He's hunting down remaining Death Eaters and investigating unusual magical activity around the world. His job takes him to the Pacific Northwest of the United States, specifically to a small rainy town called Forks, Washington. Now, Harry's been briefed on some strange reports. People have gone missing. There are rumors of unusual creatures in the forests. The American magical community, specifically the Magical Congress of the United States of America, has detected some kind of non-human magical signature in the area. But it's unlike anything they've encountered before. It doesn't match any known magical creature in their records. Harry arrives in Forks undercover, posing as a transfer student or perhaps a young person just passing through town. The constant rain and overcast skies remind him a bit of Scotland, actually, which makes him feel oddly at home. But something is definitely off about this place. He can sense it. His years of fighting dark wizards have given him an instinct for when something supernatural is nearby, and Forks is absolutely saturated with that feeling. Within his first few days in town, Harry notices a particular group of students at the local high school if he's posing as a student, or he spots them around town if he's going with a different cover story. The Cullens. They're beautiful, pale, and they move with an inhuman grace. More importantly, Harry's magical senses are going haywire around them. They're not wizards, that much is clear. But they're not exactly human either. Now let's talk about Edward Cullen's perspective. Edward has lived for over 100 years. He's seen a lot. But he's never encountered anyone quite like Harry Potter. When Harry arrives in Forks, Edward immediately notices something strange. First, Harry's thoughts are partially shielded. Edward can hear surface thoughts, bits and pieces, but there's a kind of mental wall there that Edward has never encountered in a human before. The only person whose mind he couldn't read at all was Bella, but Harry's different. Harry's mind is accessible but protected, like someone trained in mental defense. Second, Edward senses something otherworldly about Harry. There's an energy around him that Edward can't quite identify. It's not the typical human aura. Edward becomes intrigued and cautious in equal measure. Bella Swan is in the middle of her relationship with Edward when Harry shows up. She's already been introduced to the vampire world, already knows the Cullen secret. She's navigating the complicated dynamics of being a human in love with a vampire, dealing with the Volturi threat, and trying to maintain some semblance of a normal life. When she meets Harry, she's immediately curious about him. There's something different about this guy. He doesn't react to the Cullens the way normal humans do. He doesn't seem dazzled by their beauty or intimidated by their presence. Instead, he watches them with a calculating, cautious intelligence. Bella recognizes that look. It's the look of someone who knows there's more to the world than meets the eye. The first real interaction happens by chance. Let's say Bella is in danger, because let's be honest, that happens a lot. Maybe it's a rogue vampire, maybe it's a situation with the werewolves, or perhaps it's something else entirely. Harry witnesses this danger and instinctively reacts. Without thinking, he draws his wand and casts a spell. Maybe it's a stunning spell or a protective charm. The threat is neutralized instantly, but now Harry's cover is blown, at least to Bella and Edward if he's nearby. Bella stares in shock. Edward, who was racing to save Bella, stops dead in his tracks. And Harry realizes he's just exposed the existence of wizarding magic to people who might not know about it. This is the moment where everything changes. Edward and Harry lock eyes, and there's this immediate understanding that they're both keeping massive secrets. Bella, standing between them, is processing what she just saw. After a tense moment, Edward speaks first, his voice careful and measured. He thanks Harry for helping Bella, but there's a question in his tone. What exactly did Harry just do? Harry, being Harry, is direct. He asks Edward point blank what he is because Harry knows Edward isn't human. Edward counters by asking Harry the same question. They're at an impasse. Two people from hidden supernatural worlds, both trained to keep their secrets, both realizing they've just exposed themselves to each other. Bella, ever the diplomat despite her clumsiness, suggests they all talk somewhere private. They end up at the Cullen house, which is really the only place they can have this conversation without being overheard. Carlisle Cullen, being the wise and diplomatic leader of the family, moderates this first meeting. Harry explains the wizarding world, though he's careful about how much he reveals. He talks about magic, about Hogwarts, about the existence of a hidden magical society that's existed alongside the non-magical world for thousands of years. He explains that he's there on official business, investigating supernatural activity in the area. The Cullens are stunned. In all their centuries of existence, they've never encountered actual magic of this type. They've seen their own vampire abilities, they know about the shapeshifters, but wand magic, spells, potions, this is entirely new. Edward is particularly fascinated because it explains what he sensed in Harry's mind. The mental shields, the unusual aura, it all makes sense now. Carlisle asks the crucial question. Does the magical world know about vampires? Harry admits that they do. Vampires exist in the magical world, though they're different from the Cullens. They're classified as dark creatures, often violent and dangerous. But Harry is quick to clarify that he can tell the Cullens are different. They're not feeding on humans. They're not causing the disappearances he was sent to investigate. This is where an understanding begins to form. Harry explains that he's actually hunting a group of rogue vampires, ones that are feeding on humans and threatening to expose the supernatural world. The Cullens reveal that they know exactly which vampires Harry is talking about. It's likely Victoria and her newborn army, or perhaps the Volturi's agents, or some other threat from the Twilight universe. Suddenly, Harry, Edward, and Bella have a common enemy. This is how the friendship begins to form, not out of casual socializing, but out of necessity and mutual benefit. Bella becomes the bridge between Harry and Edward. She's fascinated by both of them. With Harry, she finally has someone who understands what it's like to be thrust into a supernatural world without asking for it. Harry was just a baby when he became the boy who lived. Bella was just a regular girl when she moved to Forks and fell in love with a vampire. They both had destiny forced upon them. They both had to adapt to worlds they never knew existed. They both fell in love with someone from that supernatural world, though Harry's relationship with Ginny is more stable and less angsty than Bella's relationship with Edward. They bond over this shared experience of being the normal one in extraordinary circumstances. With Edward, Bella sees how Harry's presence challenges Edward's worldview. Edward has always been protective of Bella to the point of being controlling. He makes decisions for her, tries to keep her away from danger, and justifies it by saying he knows better because he's lived longer and is stronger. But Harry presents a different model. Harry treats Bella as an equal. He acknowledges the danger she's in, but he doesn't infantilize her. Instead, he offers to teach her defensive magic. He suggests giving her tools to protect herself rather than just trying to shield her from everything. This creates an interesting dynamic because Edward is forced to confront his own approach to protecting the people he loves. Let's talk about how Harry and Edward actually interact once they get past the initial wariness. On paper, they should have a lot in common. Both are incredibly powerful in their respective supernatural categories. Harry is one of the most powerful wizards of his generation, someone who mastered advanced magic as a teenager and defeated the darkest wizard of all time. Edward is a vampire with superhuman strength, speed, and the unique ability to read minds. Both are fiercely loyal to their loved ones. Both have a strong moral compass despite the darkness they've faced. Both are willing to sacrifice themselves for others. But here's the thing, their approaches to problems are completely different. Harry is a Gryffindor through and through. When faced with danger, his instinct is to confront it head-on. He's reckless, brave, and willing to bend or break rules if he thinks it's for the greater good. He's been fighting since he was 11 years old. He's used to being in the thick of battle, making split-second decisions and trusting his instincts. Edward, on the other hand, is cautious and calculating. He's had a century to learn patience. His approach is to gather information, plan carefully, and avoid confrontation when possible. He tries to think through every possible outcome before acting. Where Harry might charge in with his wand blazing, Edward would prefer to outthink the enemy and find a solution that doesn't put his family at risk. This difference in approach leads to their first major argument. When they're planning how to deal with the vampire threat that brought Harry to Forks, Harry suggests a direct assault. Use magic to locate the rogue vampires, confront them, and either capture them for the magical authorities or eliminate them if they're too dangerous. It's efficient, and it's how Harry has always operated. Edward thinks this is insanely reckless. He argues that they need more information. They need to understand what these vampires want, whether they're working alone or for someone else, what their capabilities are. He wants to watch and wait for the right opportunity. Harry counters that waiting gives the vampires more time to kill innocent people. Every day they delay is another potential victim. Bella finds herself mediating between them, which is ironic because she's usually the one being fought over, not the one breaking up the fight. She points out that both of them have valid concerns. Harry's urgency is justified because lives are at stake. Edward's caution is justified because rushing in without proper information could get them all killed or captured. She suggests a compromise. Use Harry's magic to gather the information Edward wants, but do it quickly so they can act before more people die. This becomes a pattern in their friendship. Harry pushes for action, Edward counsels patience, and Bella finds the middle ground. The mind-reading thing is a constant source of tension between Harry and Edward. Edward is used to having this huge advantage in any interaction. He knows what people are thinking, what they're feeling, what they're hiding. It gives him control in social situations. But with Harry, that advantage is severely limited. Harry was taught occlumency by Severus Snape, even if those lessons were painful and not entirely successful at the time. Since then, Harry has improved his mental shields considerably. It's part of aura training. So when Edward tries to read Harry's thoughts, he gets bits and pieces, surface-level stuff, but anything deeper is blocked. This frustrates Edward immensely. There's a scene where Edward finally confronts Harry about this. He asks why Harry keeps his mind closed off. Doesn't he trust them? Isn't he supposed to be their friend? Harry's response is interesting. He explains that his mental shields aren't about trust. They're about privacy and protection. He tells Edward about Voldemort, about how the Dark Lord could invade Harry's mind, plant false visions, manipulate his emotions. He explains that he had to learn occlumency not just to keep his thoughts private, but to stay alive. The mental shields are a reflex now, a necessity. Harry points out that Edward, of all people, should understand the importance of having some thoughts that are just your own. This leads to a deeper conversation about Edward's telepathy and the ethics of it. Harry asks Edward if he ever feels guilty about invading people's privacy without their consent. Edward is taken aback because no one has ever really challenged him on this before. His family accepts it. Bella was actually comforted by the fact that Edward couldn't read her mind. But Harry frames it differently. He asks Edward to imagine if someone could rifle through his memories without permission, see his most private thoughts, his fears, his insecurities, everything he's ever thought about. Edward admits that would be violating. Harry nods and says that's what Edward does to everyone around him, all the time, whether they know it or not. It's a harsh truth, but it makes Edward think about his ability in a new way. They eventually reach an understanding. Harry maintains his shields because he needs to, but he makes an effort to be verbally open with Edward. He shares his thoughts and feelings through conversation rather than making Edward dig for them telepathically. Edward, in turn, tries to be more respectful about the privacy of others and more upfront about what he's hearing in their thoughts. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a compromise that lets them function as friends. Now let's talk about how Bella fits into this dynamic beyond just being a mediator. Bella has always been drawn to the supernatural. She fell in love with Edward precisely because he was dangerous and different. But with Harry, she sees another path. Harry represents the possibility of becoming supernatural herself, but through choice and training rather than through transformation. When Bella learns that there are spells that can enhance human abilities, protect against vampire attacks, even extend life, she's incredibly curious. Could she learn magic? Could she become a witch? This is where Harry has to deliver some disappointing news. Magic in the Harry Potter universe is something you're born with. You can't learn it if you don't have the magical gene. Bella is a normal human, a muggle in wizard terms. She can't perform magic. But Harry offers her something almost as good. He can create magical protections for her. He can brew potions that would give her temporary advantages. He can give her enchanted objects that would protect her or help her in dangerous situations. Most importantly, he can teach her about magical creatures and how to defend against them, even without magic. Bella jumps at this opportunity. For the first time since entering the vampire world, she has some agency. She's not just the damsel in distress waiting for Edward to save her. Harry gives her a charmed necklace that will repel certain types of magical creatures and alert him if she's in danger. He teaches her the properties of various magical plants and potions, including ones that are toxic to vampires. He explains the theory behind defensive magic so she can understand how to position herself in a fight, even if she can't cast the spells herself. Edward is conflicted about this. On one hand, he wants Bella to be safe and knowledgeable. On the other hand, he's worried that giving Bella tools and knowledge will make her more likely to put herself in danger. This creates another interesting conversation between Harry and Edward about agency versus protection. Harry argues that taking away someone's ability to make their own choices, even if it's for their own good, is a form of control. He brings up his own experiences with Dumbledore, how the old headmaster kept secrets from Harry for years, supposedly to protect him, and how that actually made things worse. Harry wishes Dumbledore had trusted him with more information earlier. He would have made different choices, maybe better ones, if he'd had all the facts. Edward counters that Harry doesn't understand what it's like to watch someone you love walk into danger when you have the power to stop them. Harry laughs at this because of course he understands. He watched Ginny fight in the Battle of Hogwarts. He watched Ron and Hermione risk their lives over and over again. It was agony, but he respected their choices because they were capable and brave and had every right to fight for their world. Bella listens to this argument and it's a revelation for her. She's been so focused on becoming a vampire so she can be Edward's equal that she hasn't considered other paths. Maybe she doesn't need to be transformed. Maybe she can be strong and capable as a human with the right knowledge and tools. This doesn't mean she abandons her desire to be with Edward forever, but it does make her think more carefully about the timing and the reasons. Is she choosing vampirism because it's what she truly wants, or because she feels weak and helpless as a human? Harry's presence and his offer to empower her as a human gives her a new perspective. Let's explore a specific scenario where the three of them have to work together. The threat that brought Harry to Forks has escalated. Let's say it's a group of dark wizards who have teamed up with a coven of traditional vampires. The dark wizards are creating magical artifacts that enhance vampire abilities, making them even more dangerous. In return, the vampires are helping the dark wizards hunt down and capture magical creatures for their experiments. It's a nightmare scenario that threatens to expose both the magical and vampire worlds to regular humans. Harry can't handle this alone. He needs the Cullens' knowledge of vampire culture and their combat abilities. The Cullens need Harry's magic to counter the dark wizards. And Bella, with her unique immunity to mental powers and her newly acquired knowledge of both worlds, becomes a crucial liaison. They plan an assault on the dark wizard-vampire alliance. Harry insists on being in the thick of the fight because that's what he does. Edward is worried about Harry getting hurt, which is kind of ironic because Harry is probably more dangerous than most vampires when he's wielding magic. They argue about strategy. Harry wants to hit them fast with overwhelming magical force. Edward wants to use the vampire's speed and hunting abilities to pick off enemies one by one. Bella suggests they do both. Use the Cullens to create chaos and confusion, then have Harry strike with precision. It's classic misdirection. The battle itself is incredible. Imagine Edward moving at vampire speed, dodging curses and hexes, while Harry provides cover with shield charms and stunning spells. Emmett and Jasper use their strength and combat experience to take down enemy vampires while Harry neutralizes them with magical binding spells. Alice's ability to see the future combined with Harry's knowledge of defensive magic creates an almost unbeatable tactical advantage. Rosalie and Esme protect Bella while she coordinates the teams using a magical communication mirror Harry provided. Carlisle uses his medical knowledge and centuries of vampire lore to identify weaknesses in the enemy's strategy, but the real game changer is when Harry and Edward combine their abilities in a way no one expected. Edward reads the minds of their enemies and relays their plans to Harry in real time. Harry then casts spells that specifically counter what the enemy is about to do. It's like having a precognitive defense system. An enemy vampire tries to flank them. Edward hears the thought, warns Harry, and Harry already has a spell waiting. A dark wizard prepares to cast a killing curse. Edward catches the intent, and Harry shields them before the wizard even finishes the incantation. They're perfectly synchronized, and it's terrifying for their enemies. Bella's role in the battle is less physical, but equally important. She's wearing the protective charms Harry made for her, so she's safer than a normal human would be. But more than that, she's using what she's learned to exploit weaknesses. She knows that certain vampires are more susceptible to fire, so she's directing the Cullens to use those tactics. She knows that dark wizards often rely too heavily on their wands, so she's finding ways to disarm or distract them. She's also serving as the emotional anchor for the group. When Edward starts to lose control to his vampire instincts, Bella's voice brings him back. When Harry is pushing himself too hard and risking magical exhaustion, Bella reminds him that he has backup and doesn't need to do everything alone. They win the battle, but it's not without cost. Harry takes a nasty curse that Carlisle has to help treat, combining magical and vampire medical knowledge in ways neither has tried before. Edward is injured by a dark artifact that Harry has to carefully dismantle. Bella suffers some minor injuries despite all the protections, reminding everyone that she's still human and vulnerable. But they won. They stopped the Alliance. They saved countless lives. And they did it together, combining wizarding magic, vampire abilities, and human determination in a way that was greater than the sum of its parts. After the battle, their friendship is cemented. They fought together, bled together, and trusted each other with their lives. But the everyday aspects of their friendship are equally interesting. Let's talk about what it's like when they're just hanging out. Harry visits the Cullen house regularly. He's fascinated by their library, which contains books spanning centuries. He and Carlisle have long conversations about history, both magical and mundane. Carlisle is particularly interested in the magical world's approach to medicine and healing. He asks Harry about healing spells, regeneration charms, and whether any of that could be adapted to work on vampires. Harry doesn't know, but he promises to research it. In fact, Harry becomes so intrigued by this question that he spends weeks diving into ancient magical texts, consulting with healers at St. Mungo's, and even reaching out to Hermione for research assistance. They discover some fascinating things. Vampires in the magical world are fundamentally different from the Cullens. Magical vampires are basically reanimated corpses sustained by blood magic, but the Cullens are something else entirely. Their transformation involves venom that rewrites their cellular structure at a fundamental level. It's almost more like an alchemical transformation than a magical curse. Harry brings his findings back to Carlisle, and they spend an entire night discussing the implications. If vampire venom is a transformative substance rather than a curse, then maybe some healing magic could work on vampires after all. They decide to experiment, carefully and ethically. Harry tries a simple healing charm on a small cut Carlisle makes on his own arm. To their amazement, the wound actually responds to the magic, healing slightly faster than it would naturally for a vampire. It's not as dramatic as healing a human wound, but it works. This opens up entire new possibilities. Could magical healing help vampires who've been injured by other supernatural means? Could it counteract certain vampire weaknesses? Esme loves having Harry around because he's polite. He helps with household tasks using magic, which she finds delightful, and he has a grounding presence that balances out the more intense personalities in her family. She's also motherly toward Harry, which he appreciates more than he'd admit. Harry lost his parents as a baby and his godfather Sirius years ago. Having Esme fuss over him, make sure he's eating properly, and worry about whether he's getting enough rest is comforting in a way he didn't expect. There's a particularly touching moment when Harry has a nightmare about the war, about watching people die, and he wakes up in a cold sweat in the guest room at the Cullen house. Esme hears him because vampires have exceptional hearing, and she comes to check on him. Harry is embarrassed, trying to brush it off as nothing, but Esme sits down and just listens. She doesn't try to fix it or offer platitudes. She just gives him space to talk if he wants to, or to sit in comfortable silence if he doesn't. Eventually, Harry opens up about the guilt he carries. The people who died because they were fighting for him, protecting him, believing in him. Esme tells him about her own losses, about the baby she lost when she was human, about the despair that drove her to attempt suicide and ultimately led to Carlisle transforming her to save her life. She tells Harry that grief and guilt are burdens we carry, but they don't have to define us. We honor the dead by living well, by doing good with the time we have. It's a conversation that Harry desperately needed, and it deepens his bond with the entire Cullen family. Alice and Harry have an interesting friendship. Alice can see possible futures, and Harry has experience with prophecies and time magic. They have long discussions about fate, choice, and whether the future is fixed or changeable. Alice is frustrated that she can't see Harry clearly in her visions. His magic interferes with her gift, creating blind spots. But she also finds this exciting because it means he's genuinely unpredictable. She makes it her mission to try to predict what Harry will do based on observation and intuition rather than visions. Harry finds this amusing and occasionally messes with her predictions just to keep her on her toes. One day, Alice has a vision that troubles her deeply. She sees violence, blood, and what appears to be Harry in grave danger. But the vision is fragmented, unclear, disrupted by Harry's magical presence. She tries to piece together what she's seeing, but it's like looking at a puzzle with half the pieces missing. She tells Harry about it, and he takes it seriously. He's learned not to ignore warnings, even vague ones. They decide to work together to try to understand the vision better. Harry teaches Alice about divination from the magical perspective, explaining how prophecies work, how they're often self-fulfilling, and how the act of trying to prevent a foreseen future can sometimes cause it to happen. Alice explains her visions in return. They're based on decisions people make in the present. When someone changes their mind or chooses a different path, the future shifts and Alice sees a new version of events. But with Harry, the futures are always hazy because his magic, his choices are so unpredictable. They experiment with different approaches. Harry tries to open his mind more when Alice is having a vision about him, lowering his occlumency shield slightly. It helps, but it's uncomfortable for Harry, like having someone rifle through his thoughts. Alice tries to focus on the futures of people around Harry instead, seeing how others react to his choices rather than trying to see Harry directly. Through this collaboration, they develop a system. When Alice has a vision involving Harry, she describes what she sees happening to everyone else in the scene. Harry then uses deductive reasoning to figure out what he must be doing to cause those reactions. It's roundabout, but it works. And in the process, they unravel the concerning vision Alice had. It turns out Harry is going to be ambushed by a remaining Death Eater who tracked him to America. But because they figured this out ahead of time, Harry can prepare. He sets a trap of his own, and when the Death Eater attacks, Harry is ready. The threat is neutralized, and Alice's vision of Harry in danger never comes to pass. This experience validates both of their approaches to prophecy and foresight. The future isn't fixed, but forewarned is forearmed. Jasper and Harry bond over their experiences with war. Jasper fought in the Civil War as a human, and then in the Vampire Wars of the South. Harry fought in the Second Wizarding War. They both understand what it's like to kill, to lose friends in battle, to carry the weight of those experiences. They don't talk about it often, but when they do, there's a deep understanding between them. Jasper is also curious about how Harry's magic might interact with his empathic abilities. Can Harry feel Jasper's emotional manipulation? Can he block it? They experiment and find that Harry can sense it and resist it with occlumency, but it takes concentration. The conversations between Jasper and Harry go deeper than just comparing war stories. They talk about the moral weight of taking a life, even when it's necessary. Jasper has killed countless vampires and humans over his long existence. Many of those deaths were justified, enemies in war, threats to his family. But many were also innocent people he fed on when he was younger and less controlled. Jasper lives with that guilt every day. Harry has killed too. He killed Quirrell, though that was self-defense, and Quirrell was already doomed. He's killed or helped kill Death Eaters in battle. And he's directly responsible for Voldemort's final death, even if it was Voldemort's own curse rebounding. These aren't things Harry talks about with most people. Ron and Hermione understand to a degree, but they were fighting for survival, for their world. They don't obsess over the moral implications the way Harry does. Jasper asks Harry how he copes with it, the knowledge that he's ended lives. Harry admits that he doesn't always cope well. He has nightmares. He second-guesses decisions he made in the heat of battle. He wonders if there was another way, a less lethal option he didn't see at the time. But he also knows that inaction would have led to more deaths. Voldemort would have killed countless more people if Harry hadn't stopped him. Sometimes there are no good choices. Only choices that minimize harm. Jasper nods, understanding completely. He's come to similar conclusions over his decades of existence. The goal isn't to be free of guilt or regret. Those emotions mean you still have a conscience, still care about the value of life. The goal is to do better going forward, to make choices that align with your values, and to protect the people you love without becoming the monster you're fighting against. They also discuss Jasper's empathic abilities in more depth. Jasper can feel the emotions of everyone around him, and he can manipulate those emotions, calming people down or stirring them up. It's an incredibly powerful ability, but it's also a burden. Jasper is constantly bombarded with the feelings of others. He can never truly experience his own emotions in isolation. Everything is colored by the emotional atmosphere around him. Harry, with his occlumency training, offers a unique perspective. He teaches Jasper some mental techniques that wizards use to compartmentalize and shield their thoughts. While Jasper can't block out emotions entirely, he learns to create a kind of mental buffer, a space where he can distinguish his own feelings from those of others. It's not perfect, but it helps. In return, Jasper helps Harry with something Harry has always struggled with: emotional regulation. Harry tends to feel things intensely. His anger can be explosive, his grief overwhelming. Jasper teaches Harry to recognize emotional patterns, to feel them building before they overwhelm him. It's similar to occlumency, but focused on emotions rather than thoughts. With Jasper's guidance, Harry becomes better at managing his emotional responses, staying calm under pressure, and making rational decisions even when he's feeling intense emotions. It's a skill that serves him well in his work as an Auror and in his personal life. Emmett thinks Harry is hilarious. Here's this relatively small, skinny guy with glasses who can bring down creatures twice his size with a flick of a stick. Emmett constantly challenges Harry to various contests. Arm wrestling, which Emmett obviously wins because vampire strength. But then Harry suggests a duel with magic aloud, and suddenly Emmett is getting levitated and stuck to the ceiling. They have a friendly rivalry that keeps things light and fun. Emmett is also the one who introduces Harry to American pop culture, movies, video games, things Harry missed growing up in the magical world. The competition between Emmett and Harry becomes legendary within their friend group. Emmett challenges Harry to literally everything. Who can throw a rock farther? Emmett wins with his vampire strength, until Harry uses a levitation charm to send his rock into the stratosphere. Who can win at video games? Emmett dominates at fighting games, but Harry discovers he's surprisingly good at strategy games. His tactical mind from years of fighting dark wizards translating well to complex game scenarios. Who can eat more pizza? Well, Emmett can't eat at all, so Harry wins by default, though he regrets it later when he's uncomfortably full. But the most entertaining competitions are the magical duels. Emmett wants to fight Harry for real, vampire versus wizard, to see who would win. They set up a safe space with protective wards that Harry creates, ensuring neither of them can actually hurt each other seriously. The first duel is chaos. Emmett rushes Harry with vampire speed, but Harry apparates behind him. Emmett tries to grab Harry, but Harry conjures a barrier. Emmett picks up a boulder to throw, but Harry transfigures it into a flock of birds. They're both laughing the entire time because it's so absurd. Eventually, Harry wins by using a summoning charm to yank Emmett's shoes off his feet, causing him to trip at vampire speed and go sliding across the clearing. It's not dignified, but it's effective. Emmett demands a rematch. And another. And another. Each time Harry has to get more creative because Emmett learns from each duel. Harry starts using more tricky spells. He creates illusions to confuse Emmett's senses. He uses environment manipulation spells to turn the ground muddy or icy. He even manages to hit Emmett with a tickling hex at one point, which doesn't really slow down a vampire but is absolutely hilarious to watch. Emmett, for his part, gets better at predicting Harry's tactics. He learns to recognize when Harry is about to apparate and adjusts his strategy. He uses his environment too, throwing trees at Harry that are too big for Harry to easily shield or transfigure. Their duels become a spectator sport for the rest of the Cullens and for Bella. Everyone has opinions on strategy and techniques. Alice can't resist offering Emmett advice based on her visions of near-future moves Harry might make. Edward relays what he can hear from Harry's surface thoughts, though Harry's shields make this less useful than it would be otherwise. Jasper occasionally manipulates the emotions of both fighters, making them overconfident or hesitant just to see how it affects the outcome. Carlisle watches with a doctor's eye, ready to intervene if anyone actually gets hurt despite the protections. Rosalie cheers for Emmett and heckles Harry, though Harry suspects she secretly enjoys watching him use magic. Esme just hopes neither of them breaks anything important. Beyond the competitions, Emmett and Harry develop a genuine friendship. Emmett appreciates that Harry doesn't take himself too seriously. For someone who's famous in the wizarding world who defeated the darkest wizard of their time, Harry is remarkably down-to-earth. He laughs at himself when he makes mistakes. He's not above using silly magic for entertainment. He once transfigured Emmett's hair bright pink just for a laugh, and Emmett retaliated by filling Harry's room with foam while he was sleeping. It's the kind of juvenile behavior that keeps things fun and reminds everyone that despite the supernatural drama and dangerous battles, they're all still people who need to laugh and play sometimes. Emmett also becomes Harry's guide to the non-magical aspects of American culture. Harry grew up in magical Britain, and while he's more in touch with non-magical culture than most wizards thanks to his Muggle relatives, he's still pretty clueless about a lot of things. Emmett takes it upon himself to educate Harry. They binge-watch action movies, and Emmett provides running commentary about how realistic or ridiculous the stunts are from a vampire perspective. Harry returns the favor by pointing out how magic could solve most of the problems in these movies in about 5 seconds. They play sports together, which is interesting because Emmett has vampire abilities and Harry has magic. Neither can use their full abilities around humans, but in private, they go all out. Baseball with magic and vampires involved is a completely different game. Rosalie is the hardest for Harry to connect with initially. She's protective of her family and suspicious of outsiders. She's also bitter about her own transformation into a vampire and the loss of her human life. But Harry wins her over gradually. He treats her with respect but doesn't coddle her. When she snaps at him, he snaps back, which she actually appreciates. He's not intimidated by her beauty or her attitude. Eventually, they bond over their shared experience of having their humanity or normal life ripped away by circumstances beyond their control. Rosalie never got to choose vampirism. Harry never got to choose being the boy who lived. They understand each other's resentment. The breakthrough in Harry and Rosalie's relationship comes during a late-night conversation when most of the others are out hunting. Rosalie is working on a car, which is one of her passions, and Harry is watching with genuine interest. He asks her about the mechanics, and she explains, warming to the topic. Then Harry asks why she loves cars so much. Rosalie is quiet for a long time before answering. She tells him that cars represent choice and freedom to her. When she was human in the 1930s, most women didn't drive. They were passengers, literally and figuratively, in their own lives. Rosalie dreamed of driving, of choosing her own direction, going where she wanted. After her transformation, cars became a way to reclaim some of that agency. She could go faster than anyone human, travel anywhere, and she was in control. Harry understands this more than Rosalie expected. He tells her about living with the Dursleys, about being trapped in a cupboard under the stairs, about having no control over his own life. Then about Hogwarts, where he was controlled by destiny, by prophecy, by adults who made decisions for him, supposedly for his own good. Harry fought for years to have agency over his own life, to make his own choices even when they were dangerous or went against what others wanted for him. Rosalie looks at Harry with new respect. She realizes that, despite their very different experiences, they've both fought to be more than what others tried to make them. From that point on, Rosalie becomes one of Harry's staunchest allies. She's still prickly and doesn't suffer fools, but with Harry, she's more open. She shows him her car collection, lets him help with repairs, though Harry's mechanical skills are limited. Harry shows her some magical ways to enhance vehicle performance, subtle enchantments that make cars faster, more efficient, more durable. Rosalie is fascinated. She asks if Harry could teach her magic, and is disappointed when he explains that you have to be born with magical ability. But Harry offers to enchant tools for her, create magical diagnostic devices that can identify mechanical problems at a glance, even charm a garage space to be safer and more efficient. Rosalie also becomes protective of Harry in her own way. When other vampires or magical beings threaten him, Rosalie is the first to step up beside Edward and Emmett. She's seen what Harry can do, knows he can handle himself, but that doesn't stop her from wanting to protect her friend. There's a memorable incident when a group of nomadic vampires tries to start trouble at the Cullen house. They've heard rumors of a human or near-human staying with the Cullens and think it's an easy target. Rosalie steps in front of Harry, baring her teeth, making it clear that anyone who wants to get to Harry will have to go through her first. Harry is touched by the gesture, though he also promptly demonstrates that he doesn't need protection by casting a Patronus charm that fills the area with brilliant silver light, sending the nomadic vampires running. Rosalie laughs and says she knew Harry had it handled, but that doesn't mean she wasn't going to make a point. Bella and Harry develop a sibling-like friendship. They tease each other constantly. Harry jokes about how Bella is the most danger-prone person he's ever met, which is saying something considering he's friends with Ron Weasley. Bella retorts that at least she doesn't have an entire cult of dark wizards trying to kill her. They swap stories about the ridiculous situations they've ended up in. Bella talks about jumping off cliffs and getting paper cuts that nearly caused vampire riots. Harry talks about fighting basilisks and dragons as a teenager. They laugh at the absurdity of their lives, but they also have serious conversations. Bella asks Harry what it was like when he died, referencing the moment in Deathly Hallows when Harry walked into the forest and let Voldemort kill him. Harry is quiet for a long time before answering. He describes the peace he felt, seeing his loved ones again in a sort of in-between place, and the choice he made to come back. Bella is thinking about her own potential transformation into a vampire, which is a kind of death of her human self. She asks if Harry regrets coming back. He says no. Life is worth living, even with all its pain and complexity. Bella takes this to heart. They have another deep conversation about identity and change. Bella is struggling with the question of who she'll be after her transformation. Will she still be Bella, or will she be someone fundamentally different? Harry shares his own experiences with identity. He was Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the chosen one, all these labels that other people put on him. For years he struggled with whether he was just fulfilling a role or if he was his own person. He tells Bella that transformation, whether it's magical or supernatural or just growing up, doesn't erase who you are. It adds to you, changes you, but your core self remains. The question isn't whether Bella will be different as a vampire. Of course she will. The question is whether she'll hold on to the parts of herself that she values, the parts that make her who she is. Bella asks what parts of himself Harry made sure to keep. Harry thinks about it and says his loyalty, his willingness to fight for others, his ability to love deeply even after losing so much. Those were the things he refused to let go of, even when it would have been easier to become hard and cynical. Bella decides that her core is her determination, her love for the people in her life, and her curiosity about the world. Those are the parts of herself she wants to carry into her vampire existence. Harry tells her that if she goes into the transformation with that awareness, with that intention, she'll be fine. She'll be a different Bella, but still Bella. It's a conversation that gives Bella more confidence about her eventual choice to become a vampire. Harry and Bella also collaborate on bridging the gap between the human and supernatural worlds in small ways. They start a project where they document the differences between magical creature lore and actual vampire reality. Harry brings books from the wizarding world about vampires, and Bella compares the information to what she knows from living with the Cullens. It's fascinating how much is wrong or exaggerated in magical texts. The books claim vampires can't go out in sunlight, which is technically true for magical vampires but not for the Cullens, who just sparkle. The books say vampires have no emotions or capacity for love, which is obviously false. The books describe vampires as mindless predators, which completely ignores the fact that vampires like the Cullens have complex thoughts, morals, and self-control. Harry wonders if this misinformation is deliberate or just ignorance. Maybe the magical world has only encountered the most dangerous feral vampires and assumed all vampires were like that. Or maybe there's a political reason to paint vampires as monsters, to justify treating them as dangerous creatures rather than beings with rights. It's troubling, and it makes Harry question what other magical creature classifications might be wrong or biased. He makes a note to look into this more thoroughly when he returns to Britain. Maybe there's a need for reform in how the magical world categorizes and treats non-human magical beings. Bella, for her part, learns a lot about the magical world through Harry. She's fascinated by the concept of a hidden magical society existing alongside the regular world. She asks hundreds of questions. How do wizards keep themselves secret? What happens if a non-magical person accidentally sees magic? How do wizard children grow up without accidentally exposing magic? Harry explains the statute of secrecy, memory charms, the various systems in place to maintain the separation between the magical and non-magical worlds. Bella points out the similarities to how vampires maintain their secrecy. Both communities live in the shadows. Both have strict rules about exposure. Both have governing bodies that enforce those rules, sometimes brutally. They discuss whether it's ethical to keep these secrets, to manipulate the memories of non-magical people who stumble onto the truth. Harry admits he's conflicted about it. On one hand, he understands the need for secrecy. History has shown that when non-magical people learn about magic, it often leads to witch hunts, persecution, and violence. On the other hand, the secrecy creates a power imbalance and requires constant deception. Bella mentions that she chose to know the truth about vampires despite the danger. Shouldn't other people have that choice too? Harry doesn't have a good answer. It's one of the moral gray areas that he's still working through. These conversations challenge both of them to think critically about the supernatural worlds they're part of and whether things could or should be different. Edward and Harry's friendship deepens over time, though it's always a bit complicated. Edward still struggles with letting go of control, and Harry still sometimes acts without thinking things through. But they learn to balance each other. When Edward is being too overprotective of Bella, Harry calls him out. When Harry is about to do something stupidly brave, Edward points out the flaws in his plan. They develop a mutual respect based on their shared values and their willingness to call each other on their nonsense. There's a particularly memorable moment when Edward asks Harry about death. Not dying in battle, but what comes after. Edward has always believed that vampires are damned, that they have no souls. But Harry, who literally died and came back, has a different perspective. Harry tells Edward about the veil in the Department of Mysteries, about the ghosts at Hogwarts, about everything he's learned about death in the magical world. He tells Edward that he doesn't believe vampires are soulless. The fact that Edward can love, that he struggles with moral choices, that he has a conscience, all of that indicates a soul to Harry. This conversation gives Edward a kind of peace he's never had before. They expand on this conversation over several nights. Edward wants to understand everything Harry knows about souls, death, and the afterlife. Harry explains that in the magical world, souls are real and tangible. Horcruxes prove that souls can be split and stored. Dementors can consume souls. The resurrection stone can recall the spirits of the dead, though not truly bring them back to life. Ghosts are imprints of souls that choose not to move on. All of this suggests that consciousness and identity persist after death in some form. Edward asks if Harry saw any vampires when he was in the in-between place, that limbo state between life and death. Harry admits he didn't, but he also didn't see most of the people who had died. He saw the people he needed to see, the ones whose presence would give him the strength to make his choice. That doesn't mean others weren't there or that they weren't in whatever comes after. Edward brings up the fact that vampires don't sleep, don't dream, exist in a kind of unchanging stasis. Does that mean they're already partially dead? Harry counters that change is not the only measure of being alive. Vampires grow emotionally, learn, form new memories, make choices. That's consciousness, that's life in a meaningful sense. The fact that Edward is even asking these questions, worrying about his soul, proves he has one. A being without a soul wouldn't care. Edward finds this reasoning compelling. He's carried guilt and self-loathing about his vampire nature for over a century. The idea that he's not damned, that he's still a being with moral worth and a soul, is profoundly liberating. Harry also shares something he's never told anyone except maybe Hermione. When he was in that in-between place, he had a choice. He could move on to whatever comes after, find peace and be with his loved ones who had died. Or he could return to life, to pain and struggle and an uncertain future. He chose to come back, but part of him wonders if it was the right choice. Not because he regrets being alive, but because that peaceful, accepting place was so tempting. Harry admits that sometimes when things are particularly hard, he thinks about that choice and wonders if he gave up something beautiful to return to a world that's often cruel and exhausting. Edward understands this more than Harry expected. Edward has existed for over 100 years. He's seen countless people die, watched the world change in ways both wonderful and terrible, and sometimes he's tired. Not suicidal, not wanting to die, but just tired of the weight of existence. Meeting Bella gave him a renewed sense of purpose, a reason to engage with the world again. But even with that, Edward sometimes feels the weight of immortality, the loneliness of knowing he'll watch everyone he cares about die eventually unless they become vampires too. Harry points out that immortality sounds more like a curse than a blessing when Edward describes it that way. Edward agrees. That's why the Cullens are so selective about creating new vampires. It's not a gift to be given lightly. This leads to a broader conversation about the ethics of vampire transformation. When is it right to turn someone? The Cullens have rules. Only turn someone who's dying and wants to live like Carlisle did for most of them. Or turn someone who understands what they're choosing and consents, like Bella will eventually be. But even then, Are you really doing them a favor? You're condemning them to an eternity of drinking blood, of being frozen at one age, of watching human friends and family die while they remain unchanged. Harry brings up the magical perspective. In the wizarding world, there are ways to extend life. The Philosopher's Stone, though it was destroyed. Dark rituals that Voldemort used. None of them grant true immortality, and all of them have costs. The magical world seems to have decided that extended life beyond natural limits is inherently corrupting or dangerous. Edward asks if Harry would ever want to live forever. Harry says absolutely not. He's seen what the pursuit of immortality does to people. Voldemort was driven mad by his fear of death. He split his soul, committed unspeakable acts, all to avoid dying. Harry believes death is a natural part of life, and trying to avoid it is futile and often destructive. But Edward points out that he didn't choose immortality. It was forced on him when Carlisle transformed him to save his life during the Spanish influenza pandemic. Edward was dying, delirious with fever, and he woke up as a vampire. He didn't get to weigh the costs and benefits. Harry acknowledges that Edward's situation is different. He didn't seek immortality, so he can't be blamed for it. And Edward has chosen to use his immortal life to help others, to be with his family, to love Bella. That's making the best of circumstances beyond his control, which is admirable. These philosophical discussions become a regular part of Harry and Edward's friendship. They both enjoy intellectual discourse, and they have perspectives that challenge each other. Harry brings a magical worldview shaped by prophecy, destiny, and the power of choice. Edward brings a vampire worldview shaped by centuries of observation, the weight of time, and the struggle between human morality and predatory instinct. Neither of them has all the answers, but they help each other think through complex ethical questions. Bella sometimes joins these conversations, and she often cuts through their philosophical tangents with practical observations that ground the discussion. It's a dynamic that works well for all of them. Now let's address the elephant in the room. What about the other people in their lives? How do Ron, Hermione, Ginny, and the rest of Harry's friends react to him befriending vampires? And how does Jacob and the Quilute pack react to Bella bringing a wizard into their world? These are significant complications. Harry is careful about how much he tells his friends back in Britain. He sends letters to Ron and Hermione explaining that he's made contact with a non-hostile vampire coven and is working with them to handle a dark wizard threat. He emphasizes that these vampires are different, that they don't feed on humans. Hermione is fascinated and wants to know everything. She starts researching vampire variations in the magical library, trying to understand how the Cullens are different from the vampires she's read about. Ron is more skeptical. His only experience with vampires is from Defense Against the Dark Arts class, where they were presented as dangerous dark creatures. But Ron trusts Harry's judgment, so he goes along with it. Hermione ends up visiting Forks to meet the Cullens herself. She can't help herself. The opportunity to study a completely different type of vampire is too tempting. She arrives with a trunk full of books, parchment, quills, and an insatiable curiosity. The Cullens are bemused by this bushy-haired witch who immediately starts asking them rapid-fire questions about their transformation, their abilities, their diet, their aging process, their reproduction. Carlisle adores Hermione because she approaches vampirism from a scientific and intellectual perspective. They spend hours discussing vampire physiology, comparing it to what's known about magical vampires. Hermione is astounded by the differences. She theorizes that there might be multiple species of vampires, not just one, or that vampire legends have multiple origins. Maybe magical vampires are created through curses or dark rituals, while the Cullens are the result of a biological virus or venom that transforms the host. She wants to study vampire venom under a microscope, run tests, document everything. Edward is patient with her questions, even letting her record his answers on an enchanted quill that writes automatically. Emmett finds Hermione hilarious because she's so earnest and focused. He tries to get her to relax and have fun, but Hermione is convinced that fun is learning new things. Bella and Hermione bond over their shared love of reading and learning. They compare notes on their respective supernatural worlds, and Hermione is fascinated by Bella's first-hand account of vampire society. Hermione asks Bella the questions that the Cullens might find too personal, things about relationships, emotional impacts, the practical day-to-day reality of being in love with a vampire. Bella, in turn, asks Hermione about being friends with Harry Potter, about what it was like to fight in a war as a teenager, about the wizarding world's government and culture. They stay up late talking, and by the end of Hermione's visit, they're genuine friends. Ron visits separately, and his experience is entirely different. Ron is uncomfortable around the Cullens at first. They're too pale, too perfect, too unnerving. He knows intellectually that they're friendly, but his instincts are screaming danger. Emmett picks up on Ron's nervousness and decides to mess with him. He moves with deliberate vampire speed right in front of Ron, appears suddenly behind him, demonstrates his strength by casually lifting a car. Ron jumps every time, which Emmett finds endlessly entertaining. Harry has to tell Emmett to knock it off before Ron hexes him out of sheer panic. But then Emmett and Ron discover they have the same sense of humor. They start joking around, pulling pranks, and Ron relaxes. By the end of his visit, Ron is challenging Emmett to arm wrestling matches that Ron has no hope of winning, but they laugh the entire time. Ron also connects with Jasper over their shared experience of war. Jasper fought in a different kind of war, but the emotional toll is similar. They talk about survivor's guilt, about making impossible choices in the heat of battle, about learning to live with those memories. It's therapeutic for both of them. Ron is also the one who points out something that Harry hasn't fully considered. What happens if the wizarding world officially finds out about the Cullens? What if the Ministry decides that these vampires are a threat or an anomaly that needs to be controlled? Harry has been operating on the assumption that he can keep the Cullens secret, but Ron points out that secrets rarely stay secret forever. Someone will talk, or there will be another incident that draws attention. Harry needs a plan for how to protect the Cullens if and when the magical authorities come knocking. It's a sobering conversation, and it makes Harry realize he's been naive about the long-term sustainability of keeping two worlds separate. Ginny, Harry's girlfriend and eventual wife, is probably the most understanding. She knows Harry has a saving people thing. If he's decided these vampires are worth protecting, there's probably a good reason. But she also worries about him. She sends him care packages with defensive potions and reminds him to be careful. When she eventually meets Edward and Bella, there's an interesting dynamic. Ginny is confident and fierce in a way that Bella isn't. She's also magical, which puts her on more equal footing with the supernatural beings around her. Edward finds Ginny's mind interesting because she thinks like a warrior, direct and strategic. Bella and Ginny become friends, though Bella is sometimes intimidated by how bold Ginny is. There's a funny moment when Ginny, Bella, and Hermione all end up in the same place, and they start comparing their respective relationships. Hermione is with Ron, who's loyal and funny, but sometimes clueless. Ginny is with Harry, who's brave and good-hearted, but has a martyr complex. Bella is with Edward, who's protective and romantic, but also controlling and dramatic. They laugh about the quirks and challenges of dating these particular men, finding common ground in their exasperation and affection. Edward, Harry, and Ron are in another room and can hear the conversation through the walls or because Edward is eavesdropping telepathically. The guys are mortified but also amused. It's a humanizing moment that reminds everyone that despite all the supernatural drama, they're also just people navigating relationships. The situation with Jacob and the werewolf pack is more complicated. The Quileutes have a treaty with the Cullens, but they're not exactly friends. They're allies of necessity against common threats. Jacob already struggles with Bella's relationship with Edward. Now she's brought a wizard into the mix. Jacob is deeply suspicious of Harry at first. In the Quileute traditions, there are stories about skinwalkers and spirits, but nothing about wand-waving wizards. Jacob worries this is another way Bella is being pulled further into a world where he can't follow or protect her. Harry and Jacob's first meeting is tense. Jacob phases into wolf form as a show of strength, trying to intimidate Harry. Harry, not to be outdone, conjures a corporeal Patronus, a massive glowing stag that faces off against the wolf. It's a supernatural standoff that could go very badly. The Patronus radiates warmth and light, making Jacob uncomfortable in his wolf form. Jacob growls and the stag paws the ground, antlers lowered. It's a contest of wills, each of them trying to show the other that they're not to be messed with, but Bella steps between them and tells them both to stop being idiots. She points out that they're both protectors. They both care about keeping people safe. They both love her, in different ways. They have more in common than they think. Jacob phases back to human form, grumbling. Harry dismisses the Patronus. They glare at each other for a moment. Then Jacob cracks a smile and says, "Harry's got guts. He'll give him that." Harry returns the smile and says Jacob's pretty intimidating as a wolf, which is high praise coming from someone who's faced werewolves, dragons, and dark lords. Gradually, Harry and Jacob develop a grudging respect. Harry is impressed by the pack's loyalty and their fighting abilities. Jacob is intrigued by magic, especially when Harry demonstrates that he can heal injuries, create protective wards, and do things that would be useful for the pack. Harry even helps Jacob with a problem the pack has been facing. There's a dark creature terrorizing the reservation, something the wolves can't seem to catch or kill. People are disappearing, and the pack is frustrated by their inability to stop it. Harry investigates and identifies the creature as a lethifold, a rare and dangerous magical creature that somehow ended up in the wrong hemisphere. Lethifolds are essentially living cloaks of darkness that smother their victims in their sleep. They're nearly impossible to fight physically because they're partially incorporeal. The pack's teeth and claws pass through them without doing any damage. But Harry knows how to deal with lethifolds. He teaches the pack about them, explains their weaknesses, and then demonstrates the Patronus charm. The silvery stag appears, radiating light and positive energy. The lethifold flees from the Patronus, unable to withstand the light. Harry tracks the lethifold to its lair and destroys it using the Patronus charm. The pack watches in awe as the creature is consumed by silver light and vanishes. Jacob is impressed despite himself. He admits that maybe having a wizard around isn't the worst thing. Harry offers to teach the pack more about magical creatures they might encounter, give them information that could help protect the reservation. Jacob agrees, and an alliance is born. Over time, Harry and Jacob become actual friends. They bond over their shared experiences of carrying burdens they didn't choose. Jacob didn't choose to become a shapeshifter. It's a genetic legacy, a responsibility thrust upon him when he was still a teenager. Harry didn't choose to be the boy who lived. His fate was sealed when Voldemort targeted him as a baby. They both understand what it's like to have your entire life shaped by forces beyond your control, and they respect each other for handling those burdens with grace. They also bond over their relationships with Bella. Jacob is in love with Bella but knows she's chosen Edward. Harry can relate to having strong feelings for someone who's emotionally involved with someone else, though his experience is different. Harry ends up giving Jacob advice based on his own experiences with love and loss. He tells Jacob that loving someone doesn't mean you're entitled to them. Bella made her choice, and respecting that choice is part of loving her. Jacob can be her friend, be there for her, but he has to accept that she's with Edward. It's a hard truth, but Jacob appreciates Harry's honesty. Harry doesn't sugarcoat things or give false hope. Jacob eventually imprints on Renesmee, Bella, and Edward's daughter, which is a whole other complication. Harry finds the concept of imprinting deeply unsettling. It's a magical compulsion that overrides free will, binding a shapeshifter to another person in a bond that's supposedly unbreakable. Harry asks Jacob if he resents the imprinting, if he wishes he had a choice in the matter. Jacob admits that sometimes he does. He didn't get to choose who he fell in love with. The bond was just suddenly there when he first saw Renesmee. But he also says that loving Renesmee, protecting her, being part of her life, it all feels right in a way nothing else ever has. Maybe the imprinting just reveals what he would have chosen anyway. Harry is still troubled by this. He consults with Hermione about it, and they research magical bonds in the wizarding world. There are similar bonds, like the marriage bond created by a Fidelius charm keeper, or the bond between a wizard and their familiar. But those bonds are chosen, entered into willingly. The imprinting that shapeshifters experience seems to be involuntary, at least initially. Harry wonders if there's a way to break or modify the bond, to give Jacob and others like him a choice. But the more he learns about imprinting, the more he realizes it's deeply woven into shapeshifter magic, almost impossible to separate from their nature without fundamentally changing what they are. In the end, Harry decides that he can't make that choice for Jacob or the other shapeshifters. All he can do is support Jacob and make sure that the imprint bond is healthy and not abusive. He watches how Jacob interacts with Renesmee as she grows up. Jacob is protective but not possessive. He supports her choices, encourages her independence, and makes it clear that he'll be whatever she needs him to be, whether that's a guardian, a friend, or eventually something more. Harry approves of how Jacob handles the situation. It's the best outcome in a complicated circumstance. The broader question is how the magical world and the vampire world would interact if they became aware of each other on a larger scale. Harry keeps the Cullens' existence secret from the Ministry of Magic and MACUSA. He knows that if the authorities found out about vampires who are so different from the ones in magical records, there would be calls to study them, possibly regulate them, maybe even detain them. Harry isn't willing to betray his friends like that. But he also worries about what happens if the Volturi find out about the magical world. The Volturi are already paranoid about threats to vampire secrecy. What would they do if they learned there's an entire civilization of beings with powers comparable to their own? There's a close call when a member of the Magical Congress catches wind of Harry's activities in Forks. An official is sent to investigate, a stern older witch named Marisol Delgado, who's known for being thorough and inflexible. She arrives in Forks with a briefcase full of paperwork and questions. Harry has to do some fast talking to explain his presence and his methods without revealing too much about the Cullens. He frames it as dealing with a rogue vampire problem, which is technically true given the threats they've faced. He emphasizes that he's using local resources and contacts, which is also true, just not in the way the official assumes. Marisol is suspicious. She's heard rumors about unusual vampires in the area. Vampires that don't match the descriptions in magical texts. She wants to investigate further, possibly bring in a team of aurors to assess the situation. Harry has to think quickly. He argues that bringing in more magical personnel would increase the risk of exposure and violate the statute of secrecy. He points out that he's already established a working relationship with local supernatural entities, and that disrupting that relationship could lead to hostilities. He offers to submit regular reports to MACUSA detailing his activities and findings. It's enough to satisfy Marisol for now, but Harry knows he's on thin ice. Edward overhears this entire interaction through the official's thoughts. He can sense Marisol's deep suspicion and her determination to uncover the truth. After the official leaves, Edward confronts Harry. He wants to know how much danger they're in from the magical world. Harry is honest. He says that most wizards don't care about vampires as long as they're not causing problems. But there are factions within the magical government who are paranoid and controlling. If they perceive the Cullens as a threat or even just as an interesting anomaly to study, they could be in danger. Edward asks what Harry would do if it came down to choosing between magical law and protecting the Cullens. Harry doesn't hesitate. He'd protect the Cullens. He's broken wizard law before for the right reasons, and he'd do it again. This revelation deepens the bond between them. Edward understands that Harry is risking his career, possibly his freedom, by keeping their secret. It's not a small thing for someone who works in magical law enforcement to deliberately hide the existence of a vampire coven from his superiors. The fact that Harry is willing to do this means everything to Edward and the Cullens. Edward tells Harry that he doesn't have to take that risk, that the Cullens have stayed hidden for decades without magical help. But Harry insists. They're his friends. He's not going to throw them to the bureaucrats. The situation becomes more complicated when the Volturi get involved. Aro eventually catches wind of unusual activity in North America. There are reports of vampires working with what witnesses describe as sorcerers or witches. Aro is curious and concerned in equal measure. The Volturi maintain order in the vampire world by being the supreme power, the most feared and respected coven. If there's a new power in play, something that could rival vampire abilities, Aro wants to know about it. He decides to investigate personally, bringing his guard including Jane, Alec, Felix, and Dimitri. When the Volturi arrive in Forks, the atmosphere becomes immediately tense. The Cullens know that Aro's visits never bode well. Harry is alerted by Edward and arrives quickly, apparating directly into the Cullen house. Aro and his guard are in the main room, sizing up the Cullens, when Harry appears out of thin air. The Volturi are startled. Vampires can move fast, but they can't teleport. Aro's eyes light up with fascination and greed. He wants to understand what Harry is, what power he possesses. Aro approaches Harry with his characteristic false friendliness. He extends his hand, asking to touch Harry so he can read his memories and understand him better. Harry refuses flatly. He's not about to let a strange vampire rifle through his mind. The fact that Harry can refuse, that his magic creates a barrier even to Aro's powerful gift, intrigues and worries Aro in equal measure. Aro probes gently with his ability, trying to get even a surface reading, but Harry's occlumency shields hold firm. It's like trying to read a locked book. Aro changes tactics. He becomes more direct, demanding to know what Harry is and why he's interfering in vampire affairs. Harry explains the existence of the wizarding world, carefully editing to avoid revealing too much. He presents himself as a representative of a magical government investigating collaborative supernatural threats. He implies that there are many more like him, which is both true and a strategic exaggeration. The magical world has thousands of wizards, but not all of them are as powerful or well-trained as Harry. Still, Aro doesn't know that. What Aro does know is that Harry is extremely dangerous. He can see the power in Harry's casual magic, the way Harry conjures shields and uses levitation charms without any apparent effort. Jane steps forward and tries to use her pain illusion ability on Harry, wanting to test his defenses. Harry feels the attack coming, a malicious intent directed at him. He raises a shield charm just in time. Jane's power hits the shield and dissipates. Jane tries again, pouring more intensity into her attack. Harry's shield holds. Alec tries his ability next, sending out his mist of sensory deprivation that can rob victims of all their senses. The black mist rolls toward Harry, but Harry casts a Patronus charm. The silvery stag appears, and its light burns through the mist, dispelling it before it can reach Harry. Alec is shocked. No one has ever been able to counter his ability like that. Aro raises a hand, stopping his guard from attacking further. He realizes that a direct confrontation with Harry would be costly, possibly disastrous. Even if they could eventually overpower Harry, the losses would be significant. Aro calculates quickly. He's a survivor, someone who's maintained power for thousands of years by knowing when to fight and when to negotiate. He proposes a truce. The Volturi will not interfere with the Cullens as long as they continue to follow vampire law. In return, Harry and the magical world will not interfere with the Volturi's governance of vampires. It's a cold peace, but it's better than open conflict. Harry agrees, but he makes it clear that if the Volturi harm the Cullens or any other innocent vampires, the truce is off. He emphasizes that the magical world has ways of tracking and punishing those who break agreements. It's a bluff mostly, but Aro doesn't know that. Aro smiles his creepy smile and agrees. He's already thinking about ways to exploit this new information, but he's also wary of pushing too hard. Before leaving, Aro tries one more time to convince Harry to join the Volturi. He offers power, immortality through vampirism, a place in the most powerful vampire coven in the world. Harry declines without hesitation. He has no interest in becoming a vampire or working for the Volturi. Aro accepts the rejection gracefully, but there's a glint in his eyes that suggests he's not done trying to find a way to either control or neutralize the magical world. After the Volturi leave, there's a collective sigh of relief in the Cullen house. But Edward is worried. He read the thoughts of several Volturi members before they left. They're planning something. They're going to test the boundaries of this truce, try to figure out how much they can get away with. They're also going to search for other wizards, see if they can find one who's less powerful than Harry or more susceptible to manipulation. Aro wants magical abilities under Volturi control, and he's patient enough to play a long game to get what he wants. Harry is already planning countermeasures. He's going to request additional aurors be assigned to monitor vampire activity in North America. He's going to set up magical wards around forks that will alert him if the Volturi or any large group of vampires returns. He's also going to teach the Cullens some basic defensive magic theory, even if they can't cast spells themselves. Understanding how magic works can help them counter it if they ever face hostile wizards. This incident has wider implications. Word spreads in both the vampire and magical worlds. There are vampires who see the Cullens' alliance with a wizard as a potential path to power. Some approach the Cullens, asking to be introduced to Harry, hoping to make similar alliances. The Cullens are cautious about these requests. They don't want to expose Harry to vampires who might try to use him or manipulate him. But they also recognize that building bridges between the vampire and magical worlds could be beneficial in the long run. There are also wizards who start asking questions. Harry's reports to MACUSA have been necessarily vague, but rumors spread. There's talk of a new type of vampire, of a wizard working with them, of a potential alliance or threat. Some wizards are intrigued and want to study these vampires. Others are fearful and want them destroyed preemptively. Harry finds himself in the middle of increasingly complex political situations. He's advocating in the magical world for a more nuanced approach to vampires, arguing that not all of them are dangerous. He's advocating in the vampire world for cooperation with magical authorities rather than conflict. It's exhausting and often thankless work. Bella, now a vampire herself, becomes an important part of this diplomacy. She's the only vampire who truly understands human perspective, having so recently been human. She's also the only one besides Harry who understands both magical and vampire cultures. She starts serving as an ambassador of sorts, explaining vampire concerns to magical officials and magical perspectives to vampire covens. It's a role she never expected to play, but she's surprisingly good at it. Her genuine nature and her ability to see multiple sides of a situation make her an effective mediator. One of Bella's first diplomatic missions is to meet with a coven of vampires in Canada who are curious about magic. These vampires, led by an ancient vampire named Swan, have heard about the Cullen's alliance with a wizard and want to understand what this means for the vampire world. Are wizards a threat? An opportunity? Should vampires seek them out or avoid them? Bella travels to Canada with Edward and Harry. Sven's coven is suspicious at first, but Bella's presence as a fellow vampire puts them at ease. She explains how she met Harry, how the friendship developed, and what she's learned about the magical world. The Canadian vampires have many questions. Can wizards kill vampires easily? Harry explains that certain spells could harm or destroy vampires, but it would require a powerful wizard and the intent to do so. Most wizards don't even know that vampires like the Cullens exist. Are wizards planning to regulate or control the vampire world? Harry assures them that the magical world has no such plans. As long as vampires aren't threatening the statute of secrecy or harming innocents, magical authorities have no reason to interfere. Swan asks the question that's really on everyone's mind. Why should vampires trust wizards? What's to stop the magical world from deciding that vampires are a threat and launching a preemptive attack? Harry acknowledges that it's a valid concern. He can't speak for all wizards, just as no vampire can speak for all of their kind. But he points out that wizards have coexisted with non-human magical beings for centuries. Centaurs, goblins, house elves, and many others live in or alongside the magical world. It's not always harmonious, and there are definitely power imbalances and prejudices to address. But the magical world doesn't have a policy of exterminating other species. The conversation continues for hours. By the end, Swan and his coven are more comfortable with the existence of the magical world, though they remain cautious. They agree to spread the word to other vampire covens that wizards exist and that not all of them are hostile. It's a small step toward mutual understanding between two supernatural communities that have existed separately for millennia. Edward is proud of Bella for how she handled the meeting. She was calm, articulate, and empathetic. She answered questions honestly, even when the answers were uncomfortable. Bella admits she was nervous the entire time, but Edward points out that she didn't show it. Harry is impressed too. He tells Bella that she's a natural diplomat, which makes Bella laugh. She never thought of herself as someone who'd be giving speeches and negotiating between supernatural factions. But here she is, doing exactly that. There are moments when the weight of everything threatens to crush them. Harry has nightmares about the war, about the people he lost, about the moment he walked into the forest to die. Edward has nightmares too, in the sense that his mind replays his worst memories when he's not actively distracting himself. Bella struggles with her new vampire identity and occasionally mourns her human life, the simplicity she'll never have again. They lean on each other during these dark times. They share their burdens in ways they can't with anyone else, because they understand each other's unique positions. There's a night where all three of them end up sitting together on the Cullen house's porch, talking about regret. It's late, past midnight, and the forest around them is quiet except for the occasional sounds of nocturnal animals. Harry starts the conversation. He talks about the people he couldn't save during the war. He regrets every death, especially Fred Weasley, Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, all the people who died in the final battle at Hogwarts. He wonders if he could have done something different, made better choices, acted faster. Sometimes he dreams about those moments, about alternate versions where he made different decisions and everyone lived. But he knows those are fantasies. In reality, he did the best he could with the information and time he had. Edward shares his own regrets. He regrets the years he spent away from his family, hunting criminals and murderers like a vigilante. He thought he was doing good, ridding the world of evil people. But looking back, he realizes he was just indulging his darker impulses, justifying predatory behavior with a thin veneer of morality. He also regrets the time he left Bella, thinking it would protect her but only hurting them both. He genuinely believed he was doing the right thing, sparing her from a life of danger and darkness. But he understands now that he was making choices for her instead of with her, not trusting her to know her own heart. Bella's regrets are different, but no less painful. She regrets the pain she caused her father, Charlie, who never fully understood why his daughter changed so much, why she seemed to court danger, why she eventually disappeared from his life when she became a vampire. She regrets putting people like Jacob and her human friends in danger with her choices. She wonders if she should have just left Forks when she first realized how dangerous the vampire world was. Maybe everyone would have been safer if she'd never gotten involved. They could spiral into guilt and self-recrimination, but they pull each other back. Harry reminds them that they did the best they could with the information and resources they had at the time. Second-guessing past decisions is natural but not always productive.
Edward points out that dwelling on unchangeable pasts doesn't help anyone.
The question isn't whether they made mistakes, because everyone makes mistakes. The question is what they do going forward, how they learn and grow from those experiences. Bella, with her characteristic honesty, says that for all their regrets, they've also done a lot of good. They've saved lives. They've protected innocent people. They've made choices that mattered. That has to count for something, Harry agrees. He points out that regret means they still have a conscience, still care about the impact of their actions. That's important. The dangerous people are the ones who feel no regret, who justify anything they do without moral consideration. As long as they're examining their choices, questioning themselves, trying to do better, they're on the right path. It's not about being perfect. It's about being thoughtful and intentional. The conversation shifts to lighter topics after that. They talk about happy memories, funny moments, things they're looking forward to. Edward mentions that he's been thinking about learning a new instrument, maybe the guitar. Bella teases him about becoming a vampire rock star. Harry shares stories about his children, about the chaos and joy of parenthood. Bella is curious about what it's like raising magical children, whether they accidentally do magic when they're upset or excited. Harry confirms that yes, accidental magic is definitely a thing, and it makes parenting interesting. There was an incident where his son James made all the dishes in the kitchen levitate because he was excited about dessert. Ginny wasn't amused, but Harry thought it was hilarious. As time passes, their friendship becomes a fixed point in all their lives. When Harry eventually marries Ginny, Edward and Bella are at the wedding. It's a magical wedding, literally, with floating candles and enchanted decorations. The ceremony takes place at the Burrow, the Weasley family home, and it's chaos in the best way. Hundreds of people, wizards from all over Britain, and hidden among them are Edward and Bella. They've been given temporary charms to make them look less pale and cold, allowing them to blend in with the human guests. It's strange for them to be at a daytime wedding, even though the weather is conveniently overcast and the ceremony is partly indoors. Bella is amazed by everything. The magical decorations, the way the cake serves itself, the enchanted dance floor that moves beneath the dancers' feet. She watches witches and wizards dancing, talking, celebrating, and she's struck by how normal it all seems despite the magic. These are people living their lives, falling in love, getting married, building families. It's not so different from the human world, just with magic added. Edward is fascinated by the mixture of mundane and magical. He listens to the thoughts of the wedding guests, hearing their joy for Harry and Ginny, their memories of Harry as a child, their hopes for his future. There's so much affection for Harry in this crowd. Edward understands why Harry values these people, this community. Harry and Ginny make a point of greeting Edward and Bella during the reception. Harry introduces them to his closest friends, though he's careful about how he describes them. He says they're friends from America, people he met during Auror work. Ron shakes Edward's hand and comments that Edward is really cold. Hermione gives Bella a knowing look, having already met her during her research trip to Forks. The twins, Fred and George, try to get Edward and Bella to try some of their latest prank products. Edward politely declines, using his telepathy to know in advance which sweets will have unfortunate side effects. When Harry and Ginny have their first child, James Sirius Potter, Edward and Bella are among the first people Harry tells. He sends them a magical message via Patronus, his stag appearing in the Cullen living room to announce the birth. The Cullens are delighted. Esme immediately wants to send gifts. Alice has a vision of Harry's children and is excited to see glimpses of their futures. Carlisle offers magical medical texts he's acquired. thinking they might help with any magical childhood illnesses. Harry is touched by their response and jokingly says that his son is going to need all the honorary aunts and uncles he can get to survive having Harry Potter as a father. When Edward and Bella have Renesmee, it's Harry's turn to be supportive. The pregnancy is dangerous and unprecedented. Bella is dying, being drained and broken from the inside by a half-vampire fetus. Edward is frantic with worry. Carlisle is doing everything he can medically, but this is uncharted territory. Harry apparates to Forks as soon as he hears, leaving Ginny and James in Ron and Hermione's care. He arrives at the Cullen house to find chaos. Bella is pale, fragile, clearly in pain. Edward looks haggard, more afraid than Harry has ever seen him. The rest of the Cullens are tense, knowing that they might lose Bella. Harry examines Bella with diagnostic spells, trying to understand what's happening from a magical perspective. He's never encountered a half-vampire pregnancy, obviously, but he knows healing magic. He can see the immense strain on Bella's body, the way the fetus is literally breaking her bones to make room to grow. It's horrifying and fascinating in equal measure. Harry asks permission to try some healing spells, making it clear that he doesn't know if they'll work. Bella agrees immediately. She's willing to try anything. Harry casts a series of healing and strengthening charms. They don't stop the pregnancy's damage, but they help Bella's body repair itself slightly faster, keeping pace with the destruction for a little longer. It buys them time. Edward is grateful beyond words. Every extra day is another day Bella stays alive, another chance for the baby to develop enough to survive delivery. Harry stays at the Cullen house for the final weeks of Bella's pregnancy, ready to help magically in any way he can. When Renesmee is finally born via emergency cesarean section performed by Edward using his vampire teeth, it's traumatic and bloody. Bella dies on the table. Her heart stops. Edward injects venom directly into her heart and major arteries, trying to turn her before she's truly gone. The Cullens are devastated, afraid the transformation won't work. Harry stands by, his wand ready. If Bella doesn't transform, if there's any chance to save her, he'll try every spell he knows. But he can see the venom working, can sense the transformation happening. Bella's body begins to change, becoming harder, colder, immortal. The transformation takes 3 days, during which Bella is in agony but unconscious. Edward sits beside her the entire time, holding her hand, talking to her even though she can't respond. Harry stays too, monitoring Bella's transformation with magical senses. He's never observed a vampire transformation before, and from a magical perspective, it's incredible. Bella's entire magical signature is changing, shifting from human to something else. She's not gaining magical ability since she didn't have magic to begin with, but her life force is becoming fundamentally different. When Bella finally wakes up as a vampire, one of the first things she notices is Harry standing in the corner of the room. She's shocked by how clearly she can see him, the magical aura around him that she never quite perceived as a human. Her new vampire senses pick up on the power that radiates from him. It's almost overwhelming. Harry smiles and asks how she feels. Bella takes a moment to assess. She feels strong, fast, aware, but she also feels different in ways she's still processing. She's not entirely sure she likes all of it. The thirst is there, a burning in her throat that demands blood. Her senses are so acute that it's almost painful. Everything is too bright, too loud, too intense. Harry is there through Bella's adjustment period. When Bella struggles with her thirst, Harry offers to help. He can't eliminate her vampire nature, but he can brew potions that make it easier to resist human blood. He creates magical barriers around human settlements that will alert Bella if she's getting too close during a moment of weakness. He teaches her meditation techniques that wizards use to control powerful magic, suggesting they might help her control her vampire instincts. Some of these methods work better than others, but Bella appreciates the effort. One technique that helps Bella significantly is occlumency. Harry teaches Bella the basics of organizing her mind, creating mental compartments for different thoughts and sensations. Bella uses this to separate the thirst from her rational decision-making. She can acknowledge the thirst without being controlled by it. It's similar to what Edward does, though Edward has had a century to develop his control. Bella is managing it much faster, partly because of her natural talent for mental discipline and partly because of Harry's magical training methods. Edward is grateful for Harry's support during this time. Edward has helped newborn vampires before, but it's different when it's someone he loves more than anything. Having Harry there, someone who understands transformation and identity in a different way, helps both of them process what Bella is going through. Edward admits he was terrified that Bella would regret her choice, that she'd wake up as a vampire and hate him for allowing it. Harry points out that Bella is an adult who made an informed decision. Edward needs to trust her agency, even now. This is a recurring theme in their friendship. Harry constantly pushes Edward to respect Bella's autonomy, and Edward constantly pushes Harry to consider the consequences of actions more carefully. They make each other better. Renesmee is a revelation. Harry examines the baby with magical diagnostic spells, trying to understand what she is. A half-vampire, half-human hybrid is unprecedented in magical records. Harry is fascinated from a magical theory perspective. Renesmee has a magical signature, faint but present, even though Bella didn't have magic as a human. Harry theorizes that vampire venom might interact with latent magical genes in ways no one has studied. Perhaps all humans carry the potential for magic, but only some have it expressed. Vampire transformation might activate those latent genes in rare cases. Harry offers to help protect Renesmee from any threats, including the Volturi. He makes good on that promise when the confrontation with the Volturi happens. The Volturi come to Forks, having heard about Renesmee and assuming she's an immortal child, which is against vampire law. Immortal children are human children transformed into vampires. They're dangerous because they lack the maturity to control their vampire instincts, but have vampire strength and powers. The Volturi have destroyed immortal children and the vampires who created them for centuries, but Renesmee isn't an immortal child. She was born, not turned. She grows, learns, and has self-control that an immortal child could never possess. The Cullens gather witnesses from vampire covens around the world to testify that Renesmee is not a threat. Edward and Bella are prepared to fight if necessary, but they hope to resolve this peacefully. And then Harry shows up. The scene where all the vampire witnesses are gathered and Harry arrives is quite something. The meadow near the Cullen house is filled with vampires, dozens of them from covens around the world, all gathered to witness the confrontation with the Volturi. The Volturi arrive in force. Aro, Caius, and Marcus leading, with their entire guard. Jane, Alec, Felix, Dimitri, and many others. It's an army. And then Harry apparates into the center of the clearing. The sudden appearance startles many of the vampires. Some drop into defensive crouches. Others stare in confusion. Aro's eyes light up with recognition and wariness. Here are all these ancient vampires, some of them thousands of years old, and in walks this relatively young wizard who radiates enough power to make them all wary. Harry demonstrates what he can do with a few casual spells. He creates a Patronus that lights up the entire clearing, a massive silver stag that paws the ground and radiates protective magic. Several vampires flinch away from the light. The Patronus is antithetical to darkness, and vampires instinctively recognize it as something that could harm them. Harry conjures a shield that shimmers in the air, demonstrating that he can protect himself and others from vampire attacks. He levitates several boulders effortlessly, showing that he can manipulate the environment in ways vampires cannot. And then he apparates again, disappearing from one spot and reappearing on the other side of the clearing instantly. Even vampire speed can't match that. The message is clear. The Cullens have powerful allies. Think carefully before making an enemy of them. Aro is frustrated because his grand plan to either destroy or absorb the Cullens is falling apart. He had hoped to provoke a battle, eliminate the Cullens and any witnesses, and take Renesmee and any other gifted vampires for the Volturi. But with Harry present, the risk is too high. Aro doesn't know how many more wizards might get involved. He doesn't know the full extent of magical abilities. What he does know is that Harry alone could probably kill several Volturi guards before being overwhelmed, and the cost would be unacceptable. Harry is deliberately vague about this, making Aro think there might be dozens or hundreds of wizards ready to defend the Cullens. In reality, Harry is mostly operating alone, with some backup from his Auror colleagues if absolutely necessary. But Aro doesn't know that, and his uncertainty is Harry's greatest weapon. The confrontation ends peacefully, as it does in the Twilight canon. The witnesses testify that Renesmee is not an immortal child. Alice returns with another half-vampire, Noelle, who proves that half-vampires can reach maturity and pose no threat. The Volturi have no legal grounds to act, but the added presence of a powerful wizard makes them even more cautious. Aro decides to retreat rather than risk a battle with unknown magical forces. After this, Harry becomes Renesmee's godfather in an unofficial capacity. He teaches her magic as she grows. It turns out she does have magical ability, though it's different from normal wizards because of her hybrid nature. Her magic is more intuitive, less structured. She can do some wandless magic that even adult wizards struggle with. She can move objects with her mind, generate light, even communicate telepathically with others, though Harry isn't sure if that's a magical ability or a vampire power inherited from Edward, but she also has gaps in her abilities. She can't do certain spells that require precise wand movements and specific incantations. Traditional wizard magic is difficult for her. Harry works with Renesmee to develop her unique magical style, something that plays to her strengths rather than forcing her into the traditional wizard mold. He teaches her to channel her magic through intent and emotion rather than wand work. He introduces her to different magical traditions from around the world, including wandless magic practiced by African wizards and the more shamanic magic used by Native American magical communities. Renesmee becomes a bridge between magical traditions, combining vampire abilities, human intuition, and magical power in ways no one has ever seen before. Jacob, who's imprinted on Renesmee, watches this magical education with fascination and a bit of wariness. He trusts Harry, but he's also protective of Renesmee and doesn't want her exposed to anything dangerous. Harry is careful to teach Renesmee at a pace appropriate for her development, both physically and mentally. She may be maturing faster than a human child, but she's still a child. Harry makes sure the magic she's learning is safe and appropriate, nothing dark or dangerous. As Renesmee grows, she becomes close to Harry's children. James, Albus, and Lily Potter visit Forks regularly, and despite the age and species differences, they become friends with Renesmee. They play together, James teaching Renesmee about wizard games like Quidditch, Renesmee showing them vampire abilities like running at super speed. Albus and Renesmee bond over their shared sense of being different, not quite fitting into the categories everyone expects. Lily is fascinated by Renesmee's telepathic communication ability and tries to learn it, though it doesn't work because it's a vampire trait, not something that can be taught. The years pass. Harry's career as an Auror advances. He eventually becomes head of the Auror office, using his position to advocate for more understanding and cooperation between the magical world and other supernatural communities. He never forgets the lessons he learned from the Cullens about coexistence and mutual respect. Edward and Bella continue to build their life together, along with their daughter. The Cullen family remains in Forks for as long as they can before they need to move again to avoid suspicion about not aging. But distance doesn't diminish the friendship. Harry visits regularly, sometimes with his family, sometimes alone. Edward and Bella visit Britain, exploring magical London and meeting more of Harry's friends and family. The two worlds, magical and vampire, remain mostly separate on a larger scale. Harry's efforts to build bridges have had some success, but institutional change is slow. The Ministry of Magic is still largely unaware of vampires like the Cullens. The Volturi are still wary of the magical world, but have decided to maintain a cautious distance. There are smaller successes, though. Individual vampires and wizards who've learned about each other through Harry's network are finding ways to cooperate and help each other. There's a vampire in Romania who's working with a wizard researcher to study magical healing. There's a wizard in Australia who's helping a vampire coven hide from vampire hunters. Small connections that might one day lead to larger understanding. There are still challenges, of course. There's the time a dark wizard discovers the Cullens' existence and tries to use them in an experiment. The wizard, a former Death Eater named Corbin Yaxley who escaped justice after the war, has heard rumors about vampires that don't match magical descriptions. He comes to Forks intending to capture one of the Cullens for study, possibly to extract their venom and create some kind of dark potion or curse. Yaxley is powerful and cunning. He attacks at night, using dark magic to try to incapacitate Emmett when he's separated from the family. But Emmett is stronger and faster than Yaxley expects. The vampire fights back, though he struggles against magical attacks. Yaxley manages to hit Emmett with a curse that causes intense pain, similar to the Cruciatus curse, but targeting vampire physiology specifically. Emmett goes down, writhing, but Edward heard Yaxley's thoughts from a mile away and alerted the family. They converge on the location. Alice saw the attack in her visions moments before it happened. Jasper manipulates Yaxley's emotions, flooding him with fear and confusion. Rosalie and Esme attack from two sides, moving too fast for Yaxley to track. Carlisle tries to reason with the wizard, asking what he wants if they can resolve this peacefully. Yaxley responds with another curse, this one aimed at Carlisle. Harry arrives at that moment, having been alerted by the wards he placed around Forks. He apparates directly into the battle and immediately recognizes Yaxley. Harry steps between the curse and Carlisle, shield charm already raised. The curse dissipates. Yaxley's eyes widen when he recognizes Harry Potter. He thought Harry was just a rumor, an auror who'd gone rogue and aligned with dark creatures. Seeing Harry here, defending vampires, confirms Yaxley's twisted worldview that Harry has betrayed the wizarding world. The duel between Harry and Yaxley is brutal. Yaxley is skilled in dark magic and he's not holding back. He casts curses designed to kill or maim. Harry responds with powerful defensive spells and counter curses. The battle lights up the forest with magical flashes. Trees are blasted apart. The ground scorches. The Cullens watch in awe and horror. They've seen Harry use magic before, but never like this. This is Harry in full combat mode, the wizard who defeated Voldemort, and it's terrifying. Harry eventually wins by using a combination of tactics. He lets the Cullens assist, using their speed and strength to distract Yaxley, while Harry casts a complex binding spell. Yaxley is immobilized, unable to move or cast spells. Harry approaches him, wand pointed at the dark wizard's chest, and asks why Yaxley attacked the Cullens. Yaxley spits that they're dark creatures, abominations that should be destroyed or controlled. Harry points out that the Cullens have never hurt anyone, that they're more moral and controlled than many wizards. Yaxley refuses to see reason. Harry stuns Yaxley and levitates him, preparing to bring him to magical authorities. But there's a complication. If Harry turns Yaxley over to the Aurors, he'll have to explain where he found him and what he was doing. That will expose the Cullens. Harry makes a difficult decision. He obliviates Yaxley, modifying his memory so the dark wizard believes he was in a completely different location, pursuing a false lead about dark artifacts. Then Harry stages a scene where it looks like Yaxley was attacked by a magical creature in the wrong place, explaining his injuries. Finally, Harry delivers Yaxley to the Aurors anonymously, using magic to send him back to Britain. It's not a perfect solution. Yaxley will likely cause problems again in the future. But it protects the Cullens' secret and Yaxley is captured, which is the primary goal. The Cullens are grateful, but also disturbed by how close they came to being discovered. Edward thanks Harry for handling the situation, but he's worried. How many more dark wizards might come looking? How long can they stay hidden? Harry promises to strengthen the wards around Forks, to monitor magical communications for any more rumors about unusual vampires. He'll do everything he can to keep them safe. This incident leads to a broader conversation about security and long-term planning. The Cullens discuss whether they should move, find a new location that's less exposed. But they've built a life in Forks. They have connections, a home, responsibilities. Moving is always difficult, and they've had to do it so many times over the centuries. Harry suggests an alternative. What if he created a more comprehensive magical protection around the area? A Fidelius charm would be ideal, but that requires a secret keeper and is nearly impossible to maintain over a large area. Instead, Harry proposes a network of overlapping wards. Notice me. Not charms that make humans and wizards less likely to pay attention to the Cullens. Protective wards that alert Harry if anyone with hostile intent approaches. Confusion jinxes that disorient anyone trying to track or spy on the family. Harry spends weeks setting up these protections, working with Carlisle to understand the geography and magic of the area. He incorporates elements of Quilute magic, with Jacob's permission, creating a hybrid protection that combines wizard magic with the natural magic of the land. The result is a layered defense that's subtle but effective. The Cullens are safer than they've ever been, though Harry warns them that no protection is perfect. They need to remain vigilant. There are also beautiful moments amidst the challenges. There's a joint vacation where wizards and vampires all go to a remote magical location in Scotland, a place called the Hidden Glen that's protected by ancient magic and unknown to most people. Harry arranges for the location through his connections in the ministry. The glen is beautiful, with clear streams, ancient forests, and meadows full of wildflowers. It's also magically protected, meaning they can all relax without hiding what they are. The Potter children play with Renesmee in the meadows, their laughter echoing through the glen. James tries to teach Renesmee Quidditch, though it's difficult because she can't fly on a broomstick, her vampire physiology somehow interfering with the magic. Albus and Renesmee explore the forest together, Albus pointing out magical plants and creatures, while Renesmee uses her enhanced senses to spot things Albus would miss. Lily convinces Rosalie to run with her at vampire speed, squealing with delight as they blur through the trees. The adults have their own moment of peace. Harry, Edward, Carlisle, and Jasper sit by a stream, talking about history and philosophy. Bella, Ginny, Hermione, and Esme walk through the wildflower meadows, discussing books and family and future plans. Emmett and Ron have an arm wrestling competition that's surprisingly close because Ron uses magic to enhance his strength, though Emmett still wins. Alice and Luna Lovegood, who Harry brought along because he thought Alice and Luna would either love or completely confuse each other, turn out to be kindred spirits. They have a conversation that makes sense to them but is completely incomprehensible to everyone else. Something about Nargles and future visions and the true nature of existence. There's an evening where they all gather around a magical fire that Harry creates. The fire burns in different colors, responding to emotions and magic in the air. Harry tells stories about Hogwarts, about his adventures as a student. Edward shares memories from his century of existence, things he's seen and places he's been. Carlisle talks about the history of his vampire family, how they came together and chose their path. Bella describes what it was like to be human and then vampire, the transition and transformation. Renesmee asks Harry about the prophecy that shaped his life. Harry explains as best he can to a child, talking about how a prediction was made before he was born, how it set events in motion that led to his parents' death and his eventual confrontation with Voldemort. Renesmee asks if Harry wishes the prophecy had never been made. Harry thinks about it and says he used to wish that. But the prophecy didn't control him. It created circumstances, but his choices were his own. If the prophecy hadn't existed, Voldemort might have targeted a different family, hurt different people. At least Harry was able to fight back and eventually win. So no, he doesn't wish the prophecy away. He just wishes fewer people had been hurt along the way. Edward asks Renesmee if she has questions about the imprinting bond with Jacob. Renesmee says she doesn't fully understand it yet. She knows Jacob cares about her, that he'll always be there for her. But she doesn't know what that means for her future, what choices she'll have, whether the bond will dictate her feelings or if she'll get to choose. Harry jumps in and says that's an important question. He tells Renesmee that magic and supernatural bonds can influence us, but they don't have to control us. She'll always have a choice in who she loves and how she lives her life. The imprint might make Jacob important to her, but it doesn't mean she's obligated to be with him romantically if that's not what she wants. Edward and Bella nod in agreement. They've always been determined that Renesmee will have agency over her own life. The conversation continues late into the night, covering everything from magical theory to vampire ethics to parenting challenges to the best way to cook magical cuisine, which is relevant because Ginny and Hermione are trying to teach Esme about wizard food, even though Esme can't actually eat it. It's one of those perfect moments where everyone is relaxed and happy, enjoying each other's company without the weight of the world pressing down on them. As the vacation ends and they all return to their respective homes, there's a sense of gratitude. Harry is grateful for the Cullens, for expanding his understanding of what's possible, for showing him that the world is more complex and varied than the magical world taught him. Edward is grateful for Harry, for challenging his assumptions, for helping him grow as a person even after a century of existence. Bella is grateful for both of them, for giving her tools and support to navigate her transformation and her new life. They're all grateful for the friendship they've built, unlikely as it is, and for the ways they've changed each other for the better. The story of how Harry Potter became friends with Bella Swan and Edward Cullen is really a story about finding common ground despite differences. It's about choosing to see the person beyond the label. Vampire, wizard, human, it doesn't matter as much as character, as values, as the willingness to stand together against darkness. Harry could have seen the Cullens as dark creatures to be feared or controlled. Edward could have seen Harry as a threat to his family's secrecy. Bella could have been overwhelmed by yet another supernatural complication in her life. But instead, they chose friendship. They chose to trust each other. And that choice made all the difference. In the end, what makes this friendship work is mutual respect. Harry respects Edward's centuries of experience and his commitment to protecting his family. Edward respects Harry's power and his unwavering moral compass. Both of them respect Bella's strength and her unique perspective as someone who bridges multiple worlds. They challenge each other, support each other, and refuse to give up on each other even when things get difficult. That's what real friendship looks like. It's not always easy. It's not always comfortable, but it's always worth it. So if Harry Potter had become friends with Bella Swan and Edward Cullen, the magical and vampire worlds would both be richer for it. They would have allies across the supernatural divide. They would have friends who understand the weight of their secrets and the burden of their responsibilities. They would have people they could trust absolutely, knowing that whatever happens, they'll face it together. And really, in worlds as dangerous and complicated as theirs, that kind of friendship might be the most powerful magic of all. Thanks for watching. And let me know in the comments what you think would happen in this crossover. Would it work? What other scenarios would you want to see? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more crossover content.